Welcome to the Creative Buzz, your podcast from the Center for the Arts in the beautiful Lake Sunapee Region. Your host, CFA Executive Director Dina Stahlheber, brings together voices from across the literary, visual, and performing arts. Get ready for inspiring conversations with talented creators who fuel CFA's bright arts community. Whether you're an art lover or enjoyer, you can grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and get ready to catch the buzz. Here's your brief summary for the CFA podcast. First, our Artist Spotlight, where we'll be featuring Mr. Robert O'Brien. Our Community Spotlight, where we'll highlight our organizations or person in our community that we want to thank or appreciate. Then last but not least, our Creative Corner with the Lowe Sisters. Be sure to tune in, get your snacks, and enjoy.
I am thrilled to have you here today because we have created this new space, or we're working on creating this new space in New London where we can have art classes, music classes, all types of classes, as well as a fine art and craft gallery. So it's all part of these new plans that we have to allow our community to tap into their creativity. So I'm really thrilled about that. I would love to have you introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit more about your background.
Okay. My name is Robert O'Brien, and I've been painting in watercolor for over 50 years. I started in high school, and I loved it when I started, and I just still love it. It's a challenging medium, but I think once you get the hang of it, it really is magical. I studied art in college. I went to the University of Buffalo in New York, studied some art there. When I was there in the early 70s, they did not offer watercolor classes. Watercolor was not considered a primary medium back then, which is okay. I mean, it is what it is. And so I studied I studied drawing, sculpture, printmaking, which the printmaking process back then was lithography, which is pretty much not used anymore. But it's good. I've always loved to draw. I moved to Vermont in 1977, and I got a job at a map company as a cartographer, small map company in Vermont, Chester, Vermont, which is no longer in business. I did that for a couple of years. I also had experience in construction building, and I was a building contractor for 30 years, as long as, as well as I continued with my art, and started showing in galleries in the early 80s, started teaching workshops in the early 80s. And in the 90s, I started entering competitions, first regional competitions, and then towards the late 90s, early 2000s, national competitions. I am a signature member of the American Watercolor Society, which is a very prestigious organization based in New York City. And I'm also a master signature member of the National Watercolor Society, which is also a very prestigious organization based in Los Angeles. I am also a signature member of the New England Watercolor Society, the Northeast Watercolor Society, and the Vermont Watercolor Society.
That's wonderful.
I'm affiliated with the Edgewater Gallery in Middlebury, Vermont right now, and also a small gallery in Springfield, Vermont, which is near where I live. So.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about watercolor as a medium, because I've learned recently that really you can use a variety of different paints or product, I guess. And you can technically call it watercolor. So you could use gouache, you could use anything if you're adding a lot of water. Is that true?
It is.
Yeah.
In fact, the American Watercolor Society, which is probably the most prestigious watercolor society, I would say, in the world, allows acrylic, gouache, casein, any medium, any water-based medium is allowed. I personally find that transparent watercolor, just as far as the process goes, is quite different than painting in acrylics and casein. Both of those mediums are opaque, and it's actually a little more like painting in oil. You can paint light over dark in those mediums where you can't in watercolor. Watercolor is a one-way street, so to speak. You have to start light and go dark. It's the only way you can really do it. When you have a medium like that, you really have to think about your painting. You have to plan it out. I start with a lot of washes. Towards the end of my painting, I start putting in my darker values and my details. So that's kind of how I paint.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
It's so fascinating to me.
it is. It is. There are also some watercolor societies. The Transparent Watercolor Society is one. That's another one that I am a member of. That they're based in the Chicago area. There are three major watercolor societies in the country: the American National and the Transparent, which is a Midwestern society. They will only allow paintings done exclusively in transparent watercolor for their shows, and if they see any even the slightest bit of gouache or any type of opaque, the painting won't be allowed to be in the show.
I think that's probably what many of us equate to or think of traditionally as watercolor in a lot of ways, is maybe that transparent type version.
Yeah, that's really totally transparent. A lot of oil painters did preliminary studies in watercolor. John Singer Sargent, for sure, was one. He painted a lot of watercolor, and he did a lot of watercolors on location, and they're beautiful. But that was probably 100 years ago he painted. So things have changed a little bit since then. I don't even know if acrylic was around back then.
One of the things that I think is, I think of when I think of watercolor is the temperament, which, we could all be intimidated by different mediums. And I seem to be intimidated by many of them. But watercolor has always been one of the ones, at least for me, that I was like, oh, well, I don't know that I can do watercolor, because it
Yeah,
is so particular and seems to be very unforgiving,
it
if you
is. Yeah,
will.
it's a probably the most intimidating painting medium that I know of. You have to approach it in a specific way, and that's kind of how I teach it. We start with our light washes, and I use a process often called the layering process, where I'll layer a wash over a wash to get the value down to where I want it. Everybody paints differently. Some artists start with their darks and go light. I use a value scale. I'll show it to you. I have it right here. I use this to check my values when I paint. This is a little thing that probably costs about $2-3 in the art store. It's one of the best tools I've ever bought for painting.
Wow. So how does that help you in your process?
Well, when I'm painting, the thing with watercolor too is you're painting on white paper. So when you put a wash down, it looks dark. It could be a value 9. It could be this value, just a little bit darker than the white, but because there's just nothing but white paper there, it just, your perception of it is dark. I use it to check, when I put washes down, I put this on my dry. The wash has to dry because the paint dries lighter than when you first put it on. I check it and make sure that I've achieved the value that I want before moving on. That's sort of part of the layering process too. I may put a light value down, a light wash on a certain thing, and when it dries, it might be lighter than it needs to be, and then I will just go back over it with the same color and make it. But it's something that I stress when in my workshops. Just the whole process of it, starting out with your washes, your light values. Values are very important in painting. Color is okay, but I think values are doing something and getting your values right. It makes for a much better painting, I think. It certainly has made my paintings better.
I'm sorry, it's obvious, right? Because color is right there in your face. So of course color, intuitively matters. But I think you're right in the sense that the dynamic and the interest of your your artwork is enhanced if you understand value really well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not something we may intuitively think of right away.
Yeah.
So I think that's spot on. One of the things I wonder for, this class is what kind of person do you think would do well in this class? Do they need to have an understanding of watercolor before they come? Or should they have a little bit of understanding?
I've taught beginner classes. I've taught students that have never painted before. I think it's helpful if you have painted a little bit, have a little bit experience with it. Having some drawing ability is helpful too, because you really have to do a lot of drawing in watercolor. Kind of gear my teaching to someone who is very new at it, and people that have taken it too. So I think I always say for my classes, open to all abilities with some watercolor experience suggested. So that's kind of
Gotcha.
it's how I kind of
Gotcha.
every classes. Yeah.
And I think, if anyone out there is a little bit like me, like you've dabbled in it enough to know that it's hard and that
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
might be, or that there's something to it that maybe I don't know. And so that's probably a good place for this person. And I imagine that there are people who have, worked on watercolor that can still learn a lot from your classes. So maybe they, have, accomplished some nice pieces, but they can always learn another approach and gather some and glean some different, great benefits from this workshop, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, one of the other things I've learned from my limited experience with watercolor is tools matter. And
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
materials matter.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I'm grateful. So anyone doing this class can go on our website and see the material list. But I'm curious, have you kind of found like your favorites or the things that work best? Because paper seems to be like one of the number one things outside of the, type of watercolor base you're going to use as the most important thing, because papers will warp, will move, will shift, will change, and it really depends on that quality. So you really can't use this any kind of paper for this medium, isn't that right?
Absolutely. Paper is the number one thing. I use blocks, which are 20 pieces of paper glued together, and it's made by
Mm.
Arches. It's a company that makes watercolor paper, and I think Arches is a paper that I use pretty much exclusively. It's the best, in my opinion. It's the best paper out there. Also, the surface of Arches paper is far better to paint on than the cheap paper. I really highly not recommend students go out and buy like a pad for $5 that says it's watercolor paper, because they'll be really disappointed. So I think paper is number one. I think brushes probably is next. You can get good brushes these days for, I'd say, reasonably priced brushes that are good. You don't want to get like real cheap brushes. If you go into a store like Michael's or something, you see they're having a sale on a pack of 20 brushes for $5. You don't want to buy them because they're not any good. I'll show you a brush that I like. These are Winsor Newton brushes. They're called Scepter Gold. I'd say a brush like this is probably less than $10, and it's a good brush. I use these a lot. Um, they last a long time. They keep a point really well. And I'd say for someone who's starting out, that would be a good one. This is another brand that I like. This is a synthetic brush made by Escoda. This is a size 8. They're a little more money, but they're a really good brush. This is $36 for this brush. So that is also, a good brush to get. You're really better off spending money on good brushes. You don't have to get. I think if you started out with maybe 4 or 5, you'd be fine. You don't need to get a whole set of them.
Now I know from having dabbled in oil paints and, acrylic, that there's different brushes for different purposes, right? Because you
Mhm.
want to get, you want a thin one for detail, you want a fan one if you're going to try to get some of that like tree detail or something. I mean, you want, well, different shapes for different reasons. In watercolor, is that the same case, or is it you pretty much just want different sizes of a similar style?
Well, I use flat and round brushes, and this is a flat brush that I use. This is an inch and a
Mm.
half. I use this for washes. I have a 2-inch brush. I can get this is a 2-inch brush. These brushes I've had for decades, and you can see paint's wearing off, but they still work pretty well. Both of these brushes are blends of sable and synthetic. Now, sable brushes are made from the tail of the Kalinsky. It's like a weasel that lives in Russia, and they're really expensive. And I don't think there's some of them are really hard to get. They're very good brushes, but they're expensive. A brush, this is a size 10 red sable. I've had this for a long time, probably 20, 25 years. And I paid $110 for it that long ago. It's probably about $300 now, just for one.
Wow.
You don't need to buy a brush like this. You can buy these Scepter Golds. Scepter Gold even makes a flat brush. It's a 1-inch flat. They even make a size 12. This is a good size brush. You can see
Okay.
Scepter Gold.
Gotcha.
And I've had this brush for years, and it still has a good point. It holds a lot of paint.
So is that the important thing? You want it to hold a lot of paint, or
You
you want
do.
to have it shaped a certain way? So I guess my last thought or question is kind of, for someone so experienced as yourself, and to really anybody, what would your top 5 tips maybe be to people who are interested in pursuing watercolor?
My top 5 tip is practice. My tips are all technique oriented because watercolor is a medium that you have to have a really good technique in order to make it work. It's not like you just dab paint on the paper. You have to have be skilled at particular techniques, and probably the most important technique for a beginner is to put a good wash down. And I recommend using a big brush to do that. These brushes are hard to use if you've never used one before, and you have to practice. Just practice on a scrap piece of paper, of watercolor paper. But if you get the feel of it, getting a smooth wash is very important. So where you start, you want to just bring that bead of water down so as it's wet, because watercolor paint dries really quickly as soon as it gets on the paper. And within a number of seconds it'll start to dry, and you've got to really work at it really quickly. Another technique that I use a lot is called a dry brush technique. And it's not really a dry brush. It's a brush that has not a lot of paint on it. So when it touches the watercolor paper is textured. It has little hills and little valleys. So it'll hit the tips of the texture, but it won't get down into the crevices. And it's a nice technique. It really makes for a pretty nice effect. So those are the main things. I think technique is really important to learn right off the bat. Number one, you really need to practice it a lot. Think about your values. I always tell my students to get one of these value finders. Also get a color wheel. Color wheels are important. Yeah, it's interesting that these basic things that are out there that you can, like a color wheel and a value scale, you can buy at any art store. They're just excellent tools for a painter, for any painter, for a oil painter or a watercolor painter.
Would you say that if someone were to become or want to pursue watercolor, that it's pretty expensive or more expensive in some ways? I imagine they all kind of add up to be about the same, because oils can be expensive.
I would think so too. But watercolor is kind of expensive if you have to get good materials. So you're talking $200 to $300 probably of an initial expense. And that, I think it's kind of a cruel irony, but if you buy cheap materials, cheap paints, cheap brushes, and cheap paper, you're not going to have a good experience, and you're probably not going to want to pursue it. But if you spend the money right off and get good quality materials, you see how much better it is, how much easier it is to use. I think it'll motivate you to want to paint more.
So true. I just think of all the different mediums there are out there, and really just so many wonderful things you see, and you can go we do a lot of exhibits, and it's easy to go and say, wow, that looks beautiful, because a lot of this day and age you can just use AI and it comes up with a beautiful picture, or
Right.
you can do so many different things. But if you really dig into, and not much, just dig in a little bit to what it takes to do some of these beautiful portraits and pictures and art pieces of art that we get to see and enjoy, that are done by hand, there's so much art to it. And I think that's where a lot of times that word comes from in some ways, is because there's been such skill and craft and work and time and effort put into it to get to that point, to be able to kind of master the medium to do what you want it to do.
Oh
Because
yeah.
it doesn't just do it.
Yeah. I think another thing that we have available now with the internet is you can watch a lot of watercolor videos. You can see how people paint. There are a lot of people that do live demonstrations with watercolor, and I think if you see that, it helps you kind of understand how it's done. I know we all paint a little bit differently, but it's the main thing is if you're just working in watercolor and not a more opaque medium like acrylic or gouache, you start light and you build up your darks. That's sort of the standard way to do it. Another thing, you can go to a watercolor show. There's a lot of watercolor shows. There's a lot around Boston. New England Watercolor Society has 3 shows a year, and
Oh, wow.
we have a watercolor society in Vermont. And go to the Museum of Fine Arts. You can see some watercolors there. It's just seeing paintings is motivating. At least to me, it is.
Just from your personal opinion, maybe, why do you think watercolor is such an excellent medium? What sets it apart?
I like it because it's always a challenge and I never get bored with it. I do a variety of subjects and I really like to challenge myself, and I love it. I never get tired of it. I've been doing it for over 50 years. Everything I paint is like, oh, this is gonna be, it's a new adventure. But it's it's such a challenging medium. I like it. I like to be challenged.
And what might make it worthwhile or inspiring to someone who might be that intimidated person with watercolor?
If the person really wants to do it and really practices, really makes a point of, I want to get good at this. It's very rewarding to see a watercolor that's finished that you're happy with. It's just there's something about the look of it, the transparency of it. It's so beautiful. You can get very, very realistic in watercolor, especially as far as light effects go. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it's a little bit more diverse than I had thought, because I
It's
think
very diverse. There are painters that are very abstract.
yes, we have a couple in the area who are just a couple
Mhm.
different watercolorists who are phenomenal at understanding it and
Mhm.
making it work for them. But yeah, there's a lot of diversity in it, and I think you can be anywhere from abstract to realist, and you can be anywhere from the transparent version to, some versions with a little opaque, and at least the contrast of the light and dark value. So it really is a fantastic. I think when done well, it has that kind of wow effect.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's why the challenge. Part of what makes the challenge worthwhile is the reward is so great, right?
Oh yeah. It is.
What's great about our community is that we really can get to know people if we want to or choose to around here. It's fantastic. So, our community spotlight today is Echo Communications. If you don't know them, if you don't use them, you probably would be more familiar when you think about the Shopper magazine that comes out weekly that many of us look at. Has a excellent circulation around here, over 20,000 individuals receive it, and I think it has a reach of something like 32,000 people. So we are extraordinarily grateful for this. It helps us keep in touch in this rural area, something highly unusual to have print, but it's wonderful. If you haven't used them before as a printing service, they're excellent. They have been around for a long time, and as you can see from the shopper, they continue to do a great job keeping everyone informed around here. So thank you for all that you do. I am so thrilled to be here today with our guests on this first ever interview that we're doing with this podcast of the Lowe Sisters. Many of you may know them, Susie, Kathy, Kim, and Holly, all who have a illustrious and amazing history from their parents in the vaudeville and circus performance arena here in Sutton, New Hampshire, and since have moved out to different areas, or some have stayed. But I'm thrilled to have each and every one of them here. So many of you know them, have probably grown up with them in the community, long history of arts, art-centricness, and just so much great focus on just the history of our community here. I really couldn't think of a better group of individuals to talk with for our first episode. So really, thank you guys so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Dina. This is great.
Thanks for having us.
I love it. And I must say, Susie has been on the board of the Center for the Arts in the past, has a amazing nonprofit career and areas as well as so many other things. But thrilled to have each and every one of you guys here. Today, I really love to kind of, I've heard it said by a few people, that this was a second Hollywood or something, or there really was just this rich history in Sutton in a large part to your family. I'd love to really understand that a little bit more and share for those people who maybe didn't grow up here, maybe who visit, who just moved here, a little more about that. So why don't you guys share a little bit about it?
Sure, Dina. I'll start with the brief history that our grandparents came here following other vaudeville people who were living in New York City and getting away from New York in between their gigs and traveling across the country. So they somehow found the Sutton and Bradford area to have their second homes. And eventually, when vaudeville died in the early 50s, they all ended up staying here and becoming lifelong citizens. So that just begins a lifelong rich history for us, knowing a lot of these eccentric people, people like Pat Rooney Jr., who started the dog house in Bradford that probably a lot of people still remember. But just a lot of folks who came here to settle and still continued to be in show business. And that gave us a very different background, for sure.
I love that. I can't imagine, it's so fun to think about vaudeville. I grew up in a different generation, but it still overlapped some, and it was just so much fun. And what a fun time to really be a part of something so enjoyable and entertaining. And so I can only imagine what your house must have been like. I'd love to hear maybe a few stories from each of you that you remember fondly about growing up in your family. I can only imagine.
Well, I'll say one thing quickly, that we didn't have a swing set ever. We had a trampoline and a trapeze in our backyard. So that was that we didn't know what a swing set was until we went to a playground.
Right.
I love that.
So
Kathy,
my-
what do you think?
Yeah, and then our parents set up this trampoline center in Newport, and Uncle Tom wrote a song for Kim. She was the little butterball, only 3 feet tall, and we used to go there and jump on Saturdays. So trampoline centers used to be a big deal in the late 50s, early 60s, and then it became, I guess, a liability or something as a recreation, public recreation thing. But so our parents would, do their fancy flips and perform and all that, but the public would come in. It was really fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What about you, Kim?
Well, my trampoline had an emblem. It was a seal in the middle of it, but I can't remember what it looked like, but just that it was my trampoline.
Yeah, she had her own trampoline. We didn't have that. She had that.
Because I was the greatest.
I imagine there was always a lot of visitors and people coming in as well.
Yeah, so we had a sign out front of our house that we made. It said Lowe's a go-go. And that was when we were in high school, right, Susie, or middle school? And
Yeah.
Mhm.
So our friends would come, and, you know, our parents were very open to our friends coming, and we play music and things like that. And I think some people stopped occasionally to see if Lowe's Go-Go was like a nightclub or something. You know, they weren't sure what the sign was about, but it was just like, here's a fun place for our family and neighbors and friends to come and hang out.
And Dad would invite the strangers in.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. That's right.
Holly, what about you? What's one of your fondest memories growing up?
Well, it was definitely a big party all the time. And I remember the trapeze in the backyard, and with my mother being in the circus, she had a lot of dress up clothes, and my thought was always going back to putting on her spangled bikini that she wore on the trapeze. So we would always try to put that on and do trapeze performances. But also the house they were always entertaining. There was always music, always people playing the piano and coming in and singing. And that was my memory. But I was young, you know, between 5 and 10 years old. There was a lot going on, and I was young and trying to take it all in.
Yeah.
I understand it.
Well, there was a lot of community theater going on. You know, when they were getting out of vaudeville and trying to incorporate themselves into the villages that they were living in, community theater became a really big outlet for them. And I know Uncle Tom wrote a lot of performances, some plays that a lot of the local people would get involved in. So we also were always involved in all of those plays. And that became more of a prominent activity later, when in Sutton an organization was created called the Homesteaders. And it was a civic organization for people to help people that are not well, and mow the town green, and just be overall good neighbors, but also get together once a month and have a potluck supper. So the homesteaders decided that they wanted to do a fundraiser, and Uncle Tom said he would write a play and everybody could just be in it. And they called the high school and they said that they could do it there. And that became a 14-year run of plays written by our Uncle Tom that all kinds of people from the community participated in, but so did our family, big time.
Yeah.
All of us were in all of them. I missed the first one because I literally gave birth to my son on opening night. So I couldn't get a part in that show, but
Yeah.
so we were all in all of them, and they were pretty impressive. You know,
Really just short of Broadway.
they really were. And Tom was a genius writing the music and the lyrics and the dialogue, building the set, casting. He would cast people just based on how he thought that they could become their best selves, and they shone on the stage. It was remarkable. But between 1971 and 1984, these musicals happened at the Kearsarge High School for the benefit of the South Sutton Community Meeting House and the New London Hospital. And they made thousands and thousands of dollars on these productions. Granted, the tickets were only like $5, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was standing room only for five performances each year. And it was,
It was a given
yeah.
way of life for
Oh,
us.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, the day after high school got out, we were on the stage.
Mhm.
So that was late 60s and 70s
71 to 84.
Yeah.
to 84. Yeah, yeah.
So that's maybe where that second Hollywood kind of reference comes from.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you had all this talent moving here. Now, were a lot of your neighbors then, did a lot of people who vacationed here, you said, moved here as well? So you kind of had this built-in community of your parents' friends, really, right?
There was some of that happened. I remember Lucille Page West, who was a dancer, and her late husband, Buster West, also a dancer, but they were vaudevillians who settled just down the road from where my grandparents first moved. And that was in a farmhouse on Meeting House Hill Road in South Sutton. that house is now out of the family, sadly. But yeah, a lot of people came in and went, but the talent that was around here was phenomenal. And as I said, Uncle Tom had a way of when he wrote the script, he knew what he could get out of Kim, and she just was amazing.
Now, it's funny to me, I think about it, as families and the dynamics and whatever, and with such, I imagine your parents were very charismatic. So I imagine it must be, you come in and, there might be an expectation of it sounds like, everyone's a performer and you just perform, but then maybe were there any of you who were like, well, I don't really want to perform, or that's not really my thing. Like, like it's part of the family thing and you do it, but you're like, I don't know if that's for me. Like, I'm just curious, were there any of you kind of in that space, or were you all just naturally in it?
Who wants to talk first?
I think for me personally, it was natural.
Yeah.
Because my 3 older sisters, I would just follow them around like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how everyone's parents act and, in their homes. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, this is just natural for us.
Yeah.
Personally, for me, that's how it was.
I was surprised as I went to school and had new friends and went to their homes to see that these people weren't singing in their bathrobes all the time, tap dancing in the kitchen, and that our life was different, that it really was unique.
It's very interesting, as Susie was saying, going to people's houses.
Yeah.
And people would always want to play cards or Monopoly or something. And I'm like, well, who's got the guitar?
Right.
Where's the music?
Or magic tricks, because Dad always did the magic tricks.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then dress up. Dress up was like, still we dress up.
Yeah.
I have a separate closet. Kathy has 4.
Kathy still dresses up.
Yeah, for me, I followed because everybody was doing it, and I maybe struggled the most. I had a lot of stage fright and a lot of
No way.
challenges of thought, okay, I'll do this, but I don't feel like I'm in my body, I don't feel comfortable. So I worked through that a lot with therapy and stuff, and just, then it became more of my way of life, but I really struggled with it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
I always loved it. I mean, I wanted to be a dancer. I was a theater major early on. And then when I realized, why am I a theater major? What am I going to do with that in New Hampshire? And then I became an arts management major, and that certainly served me well. But for me, it's just it's been in my blood. I still love to perform. I never had the stage fright thing. Wasn't a thing for me. I love it.
I still have stage fright.
I love it.
I always have had.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Even
For
with
me,
your
to know that
family.
about Kim is amazing. Like, you get her up there, if you can get her up there,
Yeah.
then she's the biggest shining one of all of us, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
You're the shiniest.
Yeah. Oh, she has a remarkable voice. Unfortunately, she's injured her vocal cords.
Yeah.
But we always sang together, all of us, all 4 of us. Kathy, Kim, and I sang together as the Low Profiles. Holly didn't live near us, so she couldn't come and rehearse, but she could always step in. But we did that for a couple of decades, and that was so much fun.
That sounds so much fun. So it sounds like you carried on so many pieces of that as you guys, grew and made your own lives and whatnot. Are each of you, so you shared a little bit about kind of how your journey went, Susie, and I know a little bit about you, Kathy, but we'll share about that too. But I'm curious, Kim and Holly, how has that influenced how your journey went as you grew into yourselves and made a career, or or had a family, things like that?
Yeah, I was always the follower too. Kathy, with her great music ability, was and still is a great director. And when we 3 had our career together, Kathy was really the one
Mhm.
who was the big instrument to say,
Right.
this is how we should do it. Her songwriting, and then we sang Uncle Tommy's songs, did covers.
Mhm.
We had a fun little career with a fellow from Vermont where he sang Roy Orbison, and we were the Shoebop girls. And that was really fun.
Yeah.
Just to step out of our regular family thing
Yep.
and do old Roy Orbison, cover tunes. And the fella, Al Alissi, a great performer.
Fabulous.
So yeah, just being happy to have had the direction.
That's awesome. Holly, how has I guess your family's experience moved you in your journey or influenced you and your choices in life?
I was definitely the more traditional daughter. I went to college, right away, and I was a teacher for 12 years, and then went into nursing a little bit, and so I always loved working with people and in the community. I think definitely living in Sutton and being in my family, it really brought the community together. And that was a big part of our life, community and family. And that's how I feel like today I still want to, I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, so I feel like even in my community, I try to get people together and do stuff together. And
one really big thing, the creativity of our parents and our uncle. Mom being in the circus, she had to sew all of her own clothing. We all know how to sew.
Yep.
We all are really jokesters with our children.
Mhm.
That's how Dad was with us. We all learned to dance. But the creativity thing, Holly is also an interior decorator.
Yeah.
So, she can take something small and make it wonderful big.
And that was all learned by our mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I put this picture up because you girls probably remember this outfit that she's wearing in this picture by the
Yes.
elephant.
Oh, yeah.
It was
There it is.
brush tone and these pink colors, and she sewed every sequin on there.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
couldn't wait to get big enough to wear it.
Yep.
Yeah, to wear it. It was
I'll wear
amazing.
that.
Yeah.
But even now, we all make our own glitter Valentine cards. I gave Kathy cookies today and Susie cupcakes that are all decorated.
Yeah.
We just have fun, and my grandkids now can't wait to come over and let's get out the glitter and the glue.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think we live for the flair, we like to celebrate, we like to gather, and that came out of our parents' lifestyle. And music was a big part of it, but the main thing, like Holly said, is community. It's like being together with people. What is the catalyst that will hold this group of people together? And we like that a lot.
Yeah, we had such a magical upbringing. The village of South Sutton was very endearing. We had close neighbors, and our parents were pretty much the center of activity. But everyone knew each other. We could walk down the street in our pajamas and go to the general store for breakfast.
Right.
And where else can you do that?
And the saying, it takes the village.
Yeah. Everybody pulled out for each other, if people were sick, there was always attention and caring for each other. And I think that's still going on there, but times have changed. It's not quite as warm and fuzzy as it was, but it's still a great place to live.
Yep.
Well,
We used to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I think that's so interesting, though, and a nice transition into some of the next questions I sort of have. Or, that sounds to me, like, such a utopia in some ways, and some of the best qualities of what I think the arts can do, right, is to bring community and to bring those connections and creativity and foster that sense of community. And so growing up at that time period, so much, so many different, there's so many differences from then till now. I'm curious what your thoughts are now, from your perspective, having been raised here and grown up in this particular region. It is rural. I think Sutton's something like 2,500 people or something like that.
Really? There's
And
that many?
probably, I
Yeah.
know. Which was much smaller, I'm sure,
Yeah.
when, before. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how it's changed, and what do you notice, I guess, the most about it?
Yeah, I think it clearly has changed. I walk a lot in this village, and I go by houses that I don't know who lives in them anymore. And that's very different for me.
Mm.
And I try hard to get to know, people when they move into the village, and it's just very different. Times have changed. We still do have the organization, the homesteaders, but we don't do plays anymore. We try to get together now only a couple of times a month, I mean, a year, for these potluck suppers. But that's still, when they happen, they're people know that it's special. It just is a different sense. But times have changed, and I don't see the amount of kids playing down on the green that used to play. And
No, yeah.
we're in a different world. And that's again why my husband and I are so involved in the arts in this area, and we feel very strongly that that's one thing that really does bring people together, whether it's the visual or performing arts. The arts do allow people to speak, and people to gather.
I don't live there anymore. Susie has continued to live there. I love going back there. One of my memories is, I say breaking into the community meeting house, but just being able to go in the back window. I'd probably get arrested today if I went in the back window. I wanted to go in there to sing in that beautiful room. But I feel like in my retirement, I want to give back more when I have time. So I want to use that meeting house more because it's just sitting there. It's been restored. And so we're trying to do different events in the summer, this variety show, open mic, and bring people together and share their skills and talents and things. So I'm kind of trying to think out of the box and what else can we do down there in that building, to bring people together. So that's something I think I've carried on from my parents is let's do something together.
Mm.
I just love that. To me, that's the purpose of life. That's to be in service to others in that way.
Now, you do a lot, still in the community, and granted, not always in Sutton, but in the neighboring communities and beyond. And having, had such an interesting career, having gone to France and whatnot. Um, what do you think is special about this area, or keeps you here, per se?
Yeah, I often wondered and sort of in awe, oh, wow, I came back here again. Like I would leave. I went to France and lived there for a while. Then I lived in California. I lived in New York. I always came back here. And I think that draw is that just that organic community sense of village, So wherever I go, I want to feel that village thing. And if I don't feel it somewhere else, I'm going to come back here because I know it's here. And, I live in New London, and you're so great, Dina, coming into the Center for the Arts, and um, all these great new ideas about how people can gather. And I'm on board. I just want to do that. And whatever's happening in the world, I feel like if we gather and have good intentions and create beauty in the world, that has to be a good thing.
Now, Kim, what is your I guess, creativity just seems to spring forth from all of you. And just that, holding on to that heart of, all of your experience in childhood, but also as you grew, just continuing to perform. What is it that you think, at this point in your life, the arts mean to you, and how would you like to see that going forward?
Well, personally, how I would like to be involved in it or how I see it.
Maybe both or whatever one you feel like.
Yeah. I guess I'm not really out there performing any longer. As Susie had pointed out, I have damaged my vocal cords. So singing publicly doesn't happen for me anymore. But with the family, we still chime in.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's been a strange thing for me to have to bow out a little bit. But I also feel like with my staying right here, I live in Bradford, but only 6 miles down the road. So I feel really very spoiled, and very protected that I'm staying in my box.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have creative stuff too. She's not blowing her own horn as much as she could, but she did that Bradford Garden for years. You know, she restored this thing that was such a creative project. And the pottery that you helped make for the Sweet Beet, and you know, interior decorating. I think we all have that, you know, and Holly went more formally into that. But you know, the creativity doesn't have to be a performance thing. It's like
Right.
we all are nurturing things all the time, you know, and that's part of who we are.
Yeah.
I
mean,
think,
there's
okay,
always
sorry.
a great house project for me.
Mhm.
You know, refinishing the windows, or, you know, painting the doors, or, you know, something, creating gardens around my house.
Mm.
But yeah, just always have a great project going, and always very grateful that my mother taught me how to upholster, you know, that's pretty big.
Yep.
You know, that if there's old chair in the living room, I'll tackle it and make it a new one.
Yeah, I think that's pretty neat. We're all like that. And before we go hire somebody else to do a thing, we try it first. You know, I think I can do that. And oftentimes we can do it. So we're resourceful. And that's a creative thing too, is to take on something new and figure out how to fix it and restore it. I love that. Yeah.
And I think one thing for me, living in Portsmouth and wanting that whole community feeling again, I've volunteered a lot with the arts, with the music hall in Portsmouth and the Prescott Park, and just being on boards and volunteering around town and loving the arts in this section. I think that, you know, upbringing for me helped me want to do that kind of work in my community here.
Yeah, and I think that speaks again to one thing that we didn't really mention, but it was about our parents' optimism. You know, we kind of think back. Was this a detriment to us, or was it a positive attribute to see life as half full always, and to do whatever we can do, to be creative, and just to enjoy life.
And practicality.
Yeah.
You know, not that we didn't have a lot of things handed to us, that, you know, we weren't poor, but like, I didn't get my first bicycle till I was 34 years old.
What?
I never had a bicycle. So we were poor in some ways, but totally rich in others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they weren't highly educated people either. You know, like
Right.
our father, you know, at age, what, 16, he went on the road with his father
Yeah.
and did the high school. He did the,
Professional school from New York.
yeah, that the movie Fame is after, you know, the School for Creative Arts or something in New York. He went to that. So he was always doing homework remotely or on the train, you know, on the way to the gigs across the country. So I don't even know if he graduated from high school. Did he graduate
I
from
don't
high
think you did.
Yeah. No, he did. He finally
school?
did.
He did from that? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know if our grandfather went to college. So education was not something they ever pushed. I don't
Right.
remember. And I didn't go to school till I didn't go to college till I was like almost 30, you know,
Yeah.
and decided to go to college. So they just said, just do what you want to do and be happy. We'll support you.
Mhm.
Just want you to be happy. And so that was so wide and broad. It's like, okay, how do I be happy? I just go do things I like to do and see if I can make money at it.
Mhm.
So not a whole lot of guidance with that, you know.
But support in whatever we wanted to
Yeah,
really.
support, and it was just really simple to them. You do what you want to do, and we'll support you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And cheer you on. You know, they're always cheering us on.
Yeah.
What a fun way to grow up, just to have the freedom of all the access to the liveliness and connectivity, but also just the that's kind of support and nurture in a free way, right? I think that's so important and sounds like it was very empowering to you guys. Um, what would you say to the next generation? I just feel like that's probably so uncommon these days, and I hope it's not. I hope there's spots in the US where it's still, just that kind of fun community that it sounds like you grew up surrounded in. I hope that does still exist in places, but it's such a different world. Everyone's plugged in, and especially since COVID, it's a whole different mindset about being around people and whatnot. So I know it's different, but I guess today, like, what would you hope for the next generation? Like, what things do you think can translate, maybe from like that specialness of your upbringing? Is there anything you feel like can be kind of transferred to the next generation, or maybe even just your hope for it? Um,
Well, I think for me, both of my children, I'm glad that they still live in Sutton, and my 5 grandchildren are in Sutton. And now I have 2 great grandchildren coming along the way. And what I'm sensing and what I see that's powerful for them is still the sense of community, that this is very important to them. All of them still embody that. And I think that's something that Sutton has helped give them. And I hope that it will retain a little bit. But yeah, I have a lot of concerns for this next generation. And I think the one thing that can be a saving grace is that they can connect to community, that they really, if they can embody that, if they can find a sense of purpose and belonging, that's going to help them be better people.
Yeah, I fear for the next generation too, with the technology that has separated people's hearts. You know, people connect with information and cryptic messaging and all that. I long for sitting in a room with people who are under 20 and having a conversation where they look you in the eye, you know. It's just, we're losing that. We're losing human connection. And I fear for that.
I think it's one of the cool things, that as artists and people in the arts community really have a opportunity to help our society with, right? Because there's so many intangiblenesses to community when we talk about it. It's kind of like, um, you know it, but to explain it would be very tricky. And what are really all of the pieces of it? So I think it's really an awesome challenge and opportunity to artists of today to really figure out or come up with different ideas that can help us all um, recapture some of this community that I think has been lost in so many places. I moved here only, 3 or 4 years ago, from a different place in New Hampshire, and it's a bigger town. I don't know if we have too many cities here in New Hampshire, but I would say that I think what is so special about this area is that sense of community, where I have not seen that, in a lot of places, because it's harder when there's more people. So it's nice. You can stop in at places and they know you if you come there more than once. And they're like, oh, I remember you, blah, blah. Most of the times people who've lived here more than 3 years, it seems like you can really have a conversation with almost everyone on the street because you know them in some way, shape, or form. My family gets stopped all the time because my husband's in the school system. My kids are in the school system. They meet a friend, they see a parent, they see a so and so. We run into people all the time. And it's just to me, that initial sense of what I think humans often crave is that community. I think we're made to be in community and have that sense of belonging personally. And I just love when I get to see it. So I don't know what it is about this area, but I think there is such a wonderful opportunity for people to experience it still if they want to. Um, Not that it will necessarily happen.
You brought up the school. Here we have our regional high school or regional schools everywhere, 7 communities. But we're all on one umbrella. And I think that is amazing to me that it's not New London this or Springfield that, but we are all in it together. And I think that really helps open up our eyes to be a really sharing area.
Thanks for tuning in to The Creative Buzz, brought to you by the Center for the Arts in the Lake Sunapee Region. Be sure to follow us for more inspiring conversations with artists and creative minds, and stay connected by visiting our website and social media. Until next time, keep gathering, keep connecting, and most of all, keep creating.